Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. Very excited to have Cato Pastoll, the co-founder and CEO at Lending Loop. How's it going, Cato?
Great, thanks for yourself.
Yeah, very good. Thank you for joining me today. Um,
Thanks for having
so
me.
let's kick it off as we normally do on the show. So for those who've never heard of Lending Loop, can you tell us a bit about what you guys do?
Absolutely. So it'll be a little bit of a long-winded story, but we started Lending Loop about 6 years ago now. And the idea was to connect small businesses that were looking for an affordable source of financing with investors who want to lend money to those businesses. So people like yourself and myself who want to lend money to businesses could go online through an online platform to invest in businesses that were looking for capital. And so that business model was actually originally started back in the UK about 10 or 12 years ago now, and became very successful over there. We saw how successful it was and saw that there was an opportunity to bring it to the Canadian market and help small businesses over here, which was why we started it. Kind of fast forwarding to today and 2020, we've actually come into the market by launching a new product. So that new product is called Loop, and we're specifically focused on digital online businesses. So people selling directly to consumer online through platforms like Amazon or directly through Shopify or WooCommerce. And the idea there is, especially with the changes, which I'm sure we'll talk about, that have happened over the last few months and since the onset of 2020, there's been a rapid increase in business activity in the online space. So that led us to launch a new product for digital businesses.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that and speak about Loop. But on the first part, you were kind of you were the pioneer of peer-to-peer lending in Canada, correct?
Yeah, so we were actually the first company here to come to market, and we actually got regulatory approval to operate in October 2016. So we were the first company to launch and first company to get regulatory approval to operate a peer-to-peer lending marketplace in the country, which was really exciting at the time because it was one of the most novel things that had been done from a regulatory perspective, and definitely was a lot of work to bring that model to market here in Canada.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. And since, well, on the last episode, actually, I had the chance to speak to Marc-Antoine Kaya, the founder of GoPeer, that does person to person, but it's business to person, which was kind of, well, set the precedent for it and opened up that regulatory approval. How was that to let's start on the regulatory side, because I'm sure that wasn't easy. Sandboxes were probably not that much of a thing back then. How did you convince the regulatory bodies to let you operate in Canada?
Yeah, I mean, it was a tremendous challenge, and a few years on, I can smile and laugh about it, but I probably wouldn't have been smiling and laughing if you asked me back in 2015 or 2016. It's very challenging to convince a regulator whose job it is to protect the market and enforce existing rules and regulation, that they should allow something new to take place in the market. And so it was a tremendous uphill battle, not just working with the regulator, but working with various stakeholders, educating the banks on what we did, educating the government on what we did, and why it would be beneficial for Canadian businesses and Canadian individuals. So it was a lot of years of hard work and convincing people, telling people our story to be able to bring that model to market in Canada. At the end of the day, obviously we were successful, but there were a lot of times where we thought. We thought it wasn't going to it wasn't actually going to happen, and I think it was really a story of perseverance, because we really were dedicated to bringing that model to market because we knew how much it could help businesses if we were able to do that. We knew that people out there really wanted to support businesses. There was a strong demand for this to take place, but there was just something wrong in the ecosystem that just wasn't allowing it to happen. So the funny kind of conclusion to the story, you just mentioned sandboxes, is the regulatory sandbox that was launched was actually launched on the same day that our business got regulatory approval. So
No
I kind
way.
of I like to say that we were the sandball, we were the creation of the sandbox in many ways.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know that. That's super interesting.
Yeah,
Um, so maybe let's rewind to the early days at when you got started. Um, you're from the UK, correct? So that's where
correct.
you
Yeah.
saw the model, and then you moved to Canada for school. Could you tell us a bit about your background?
Yeah, I mean, it's super relevant to what I'm doing now. My parents were both small business owners, so I grew up working in their businesses. Throughout my childhood, throughout school, would work in their businesses nights and weekends, helping them out, whether it was washing the dishes or my mom was a caterer, so washing the dishes is a real job that had to be done, or later on in life, helping with financial modeling and spreadsheets and budgeting and things like that as I became more interested in finance. So I've always been very closely connected to the small business world, and even ran some of my own kind of small businesses on the side in school, car washes and things like that. And so later on, actually in university, I went to university here in Canada, Western University in London, Ontario. And that's where I met my business partner, who had a very similar background to myself. And we basically were talking about ways that we could make it easier for business owners who always traditionally have the hardest time getting access to capital, how we could help them get faster, more efficient, and more affordable financing than what's available today. They're often ignored by traditional financial institutions. There's usually not many other options for them to go outside family or friends, and sometimes it's kind of lucky whether or not you've got family and friends who have the capital to lend to you. So we just saw this as a much more efficient model to lend money, and obviously that really tied into my personal background.
Awesome. And then so once you started, you found your business partner. You guys wanted to go. You have that chicken and egg problem, right? You have to have the people willing to lend, but then you have to find the businesses also who want to partake. How was that getting your first customers, and what was your strategy there?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot in the last 5 years has been written about marketplace businesses, especially since Uber and Airbnb have become a lot more popular than they were 10 or 15 years ago. If they didn't even exist 10 or 15 years ago, right? So, yeah, the model of building a marketplace was very much a learning experience. I think ultimately, if I could distill it down to one simple thing, you have to figure out how to fix supply or demand. So you've got to fix one side of your marketplace. And the one that you have to fix is the one where you're not necessarily providing a unique product or unique value. And what I mean by that is one side of the marketplace is always the side that wants to interact with you, has more clear of a need. In the example of like an Airbnb, their real customer, even though you may think you're using their app as a customer when you're booking a property, their real customer is actually the person who owns the real estate. They're the ones that are interacting with the product every day. They're the ones that are using it every day. And so those people are the important ones to get fixed on, because once they have those people on the platform, it makes it a lot easier to go to the market and make it easy and distribute their supply, so to speak, to people. And I guess it was a similar story with us. In terms of figuring out that equation, it was obviously a lot of trial and error, and a lot of falling on our faces a few times, but ultimately figured out that we had to find ways to fix what we called the supply on our platform, which was the supply of capital or investors who wanted to fund the product.
Okay. Okay, perfect. And then what did that journey look like? So you started off, you're two people from the get go. Did you grow quickly? Um, did you get investments early on?
Yeah, in the very beginning, we built everything ourselves. So we managed to keep things very lean. We built the platform and the technology without hiring anybody or raising any capital.
I'm
So we
guessing
kind of
your
got
co-founder was on the technical side, right?
correct, yeah. He's the more technical of the two of us, but actually we both wrote code. We both
Okay.
I don't want to say worked equally, but definitely worked very hard at getting it to where it is today. Oh, sorry, no, where it needed to be back then. You know, for an MVP or for a V1 to work. And then we launched it. Our first hire was actually somebody who was helping from a sales perspective, so helping us to find small business customers who would use the platform. And then to make a long story short, after I guess a few months of iterating, we kind of started to hit our stride, started to figure out how we could start getting some scale, and then we raised capital about 6 months later.
Okay. And how
Yeah.
was that whole experience as a first time? Because I know you had other entrepreneurial experiences like car washing, for example. But for building a tech startup in Canada, what was that experience like? Your first funding round, or even before that, your first hire?
Yeah, it was I would say that there's no better experience than going through it, right? Like you can read every textbook, you can listen to every podcast, but there's nothing quite like the experience of actually going and doing it yourself and getting your hands dirty and failing. And learning from those failures and turning them into successes the next time you go around. So there were so many different things from hiring to regulatory processes and what we had to do there to finding our first investor, finding our first lender to fund the loans, finding our first business. That were all tremendous learning experiences for us as we were getting started. But it's hard to point to one and say that one was the most important. They were all kind of equally challenging, but definitely so much that we look back on now and kind of laugh about how little we knew when we started the business. But that's a good thing. Like that's the type of learning experience that you want to go through as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. And then since then, how many people have? I'm curious to know in numbers. How many people have you hired? How many customers do you have on both sides of the platform as well?
Yeah, sure. So there's currently about 25 people on our team today, and we have lent to about 1,000 businesses across Canada, just under that, and we have about 12,000 people who have lent money to those businesses. So those are Canadian investors who have lent money to small businesses across Canada.
That's amazing.
And I know we'll get into this in a bit, but obviously with this new product that we launched a few months ago, started to really get some great inroads with that, and so we've already lent our first million out, and hopefully by the end of the year we'll be at about $5 to $10 million of capital deployed to e-commerce businesses.
Wow, congrats. And plus, with the holiday season, I guess that's going to probably be an important factor. Um, but yeah, maybe just before we get into the logic behind launching this new product. So COVID hit, you're already like an established business. What were the impacts for your business and also for you as the leader of the organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone, whether it's positive or negative, has been impacted by the pandemic, and obviously, we weren't immune to that, and more importantly, our customers weren't immune to that. So as we saw, a lot of things had to shut down: restaurants, retailers, gyms. I could go on and on with the list. I'm sure we're all familiar with how many businesses were forced to close. And we can debate or argue what's fair and not or what's not fair, what's right and what's not right. But at the end of the day, there were customers who had, people who had built for many years of their lives and invested their livelihood into building these businesses, and so it was a very difficult time. Aside from the chaos and confusion that was caused by just there being a global pandemic that scares people. I think the impact directly on these small businesses was startling. I actually, because of how much we were seeing it firsthand, I became very involved in advocacy work, trying to promote support programs for small businesses directly with the government in Canada. I actually wrote an opinion piece in the Globe and Mail earlier this year, specifically talking about some of the statistics that we were seeing on the ground around the impact of COVID on small businesses. Now that we're kind of 7 months into this, I think what we can say is that obviously the impact has been profound. There's been some relief that's been provided through various government programs and things like that, but still a lot more needs to be done to support the community and specifically support small local businesses if we want them to survive through to next year, right? I guess to that effect, obviously it directly impacted our business because we're in the business of supporting those types of companies. And unfortunately, because of everything that's gone on, obviously we saw a massive decrease in demand for capital because very few people were thinking about growth and how they were going to, open new locations or expand or renovate or do those types of things, which is usually why people come to us. They started to focus on how they could cut expenses and how they could stay afloat, right? So that
Yeah,
that that was kind of, yeah.
I would have thought it was the opposite when we first talked, right? Because they need
Yeah.
cash flow, but it makes sense. They're looking for these funds for growth. Whereas, the government programs were then supporting the individuals with their relief programs. It's yeah, from a first glance, I would have thought that was the reality. But so I guess you took that and then had to realize, well, how else could you help these businesses? And that e-commerce is. Were you already had e-commerce clients before with Lending Loop, or was really just for people with brick and mortar stores?
Yeah, no, good question. We did. We definitely did have some clients. Our product, though, I would say, wasn't necessarily best suited to that sector, and the reason for that is e-commerce businesses. The way that their business works is they're typically buying inventory, sitting on that inventory for relatively short periods of time, 60, 90, 120 days, and then selling it. And so what they really need is a short-term injection of capital to have them grow inventory. For example, ahead of the holiday season, right? Like you want to sell a lot in the holiday season, you've got to go out and maybe buy millions of dollars of stuff. And then, by the end of December, hopefully, if all goes well, you've sold out of it, right? And so the type of loan that those businesses need is more of a revolving type of credit structure. Other financing products, like even our old financing product that our original financing product, I should say, are more suited to 3, 4, 5 year projects, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so while we did work with some of them, our product wasn't really built for them. It was more built for like that expansion or long term growth. And so, having spoken to various entrepreneurs that run online businesses, we realized that the product would need to change quite a bit in order to work for those types of businesses.
Gotcha. Okay. And then how did you go about like what was that like in COVID? I guess everybody from home and what was the moment that you said, okay, let's launch a new product?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a magic day, I'll be honest. Like, it wasn't like, at March 30th, like, fingers snapped
Woke up
and,
out of bed and
yeah.
I
It was a lot of fumbling around, trying different things, speaking to different companies. I mean, I'll be honest. Like, I spoke to people in various different business sectors that were existing clients or people that I got introduced to. For example, spent quite a bit of time talking to businesses in the agriculture sector and the healthcare sector. Those were obviously other examples of products or services that were in demand or have been in demand as a result of COVID. So we looked at various different things. I guess, after speaking to quite a few people in the e-commerce space, one of the things that we really understood or liked about it is that typically very entrepreneurial, forward-thinking, technology-enabled entrepreneurs, right? Like people, they're operating digital businesses. So there's a lot of alignment between what we're trying to do and what they're trying to do with their businesses. That's the first thing. And the second thing that we started to realize was that there was an opportunity to build meaningful partnerships with those businesses. I think I've always wanted to work with businesses in a way that's not transactional. It's not like, okay, hey, like how do we help you today, and then shake hands and then never see you again. And so there was a lot of things that we heard from these businesses that allowed us to start thinking about like how do we could evolve our product with these companies to not just help them be successful today, but in their needs for the next 6, 12, 24, 36 months, and actually grow with these businesses. And so just got really, really attracted to the sector and really interested the more conversations I had with entrepreneurs and founders, and understood that there was a real financing gap here. Like there was a certain need where they're not getting the service that they need from a financing perspective, and so a lot of the things just kind of started to fall into place. From like I'd call it like April, May, June, and so that kind of eventually, I guess we at a certain point, kind of in the middle of the summer, made the decision like we're going to go all in on this strategy.
Okay. Okay, neat. And the strategy is a bit different, right? Because you're not getting investors per se. How are you getting that capital for the, or unless I'm mistaken, is it the same model as Lending Loop, a marketplace, or you're getting the funds from institutional investors?
Yeah, good question. So it's right now, it's obviously it's a new product, so it's brand new for us. We do plan to make this available to all types of investors. That's kind of always been part of our goal and our strategy. And one of the reasons that I didn't really talk about this before, but one of the reasons I started Lending Loop was also so that I could invest in businesses, right? Like I really love the idea of of making those investment opportunities available to people. So answering your question, initially, yes, we're kind of working with more institutional investors to fund the loans. But our goal is, as we start to grow this, to offer up the investment opportunity to our lenders on our platform as well. So that is in our plans, and hopefully something that we'll do in the coming months.
Okay, very cool. Um, Launching a new product, so in a way within the same company, but it's your second product. How was that versus the first launch? Did it go much quicker? I guess so with your experience, but could you compare and contrast launching Lending Loop and then launching Loop?
Um, Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because a lot of businesses pivot, and a lot of businesses will like, have a certain strategy or direction, and then will, shift that by iteration over time. This was what was unique about this is like usually when you're iterating, I mean, we've iterated too on our product in the past. It's kind of like slow iterations of like, okay, we try this product, we try this customer, and like you kind of move in a little bit of a direction. Because of COVID, it was like a sharp U-turn type of thing, right? It was like, it wasn't like, oh, we've got time to like figure it out and talk to people. It was really like, knife jab through the heart. Now it's like, okay,
Yeah.
pull it out and, put a wound on and start going in a different direction, start fighting again, right? So I think that was what was unique about this situation in 2020 is it's not like there was an issue necessarily with it. Typically pivots happen because like the business model doesn't exactly work or doesn't line up. In this case,
Hmm.
like it was a external event that occurred. But that being said, we had a ton, and you said this, like we had a ton of experience in the sector with small businesses, working with a lending product, and also had worked with some customers in this industry already. So there was a ton of experience that not just us as founders, but our whole team already had, and that brought to the table. So we in a couple of months of doing this, we've already been able to achieve, I think, what took us about almost a year the first time around, just from like a purely from a volume perspective. So there's lots of little things that are the reason for that, but For sure, we're going significantly faster this time around. Not making a lot of the mistakes that we made the first time around is obviously a huge part of that. And we're still learning, but I think we're really excited because we do feel, like just partly from speaking to customers, it feels like we're building something really special at the moment.
That's awesome. Congrats, because it takes a certain level of courage and resilience to be able to well, for everybody to get through COVID, but plus
Yeah.
to be able to adapt like you did. I think it's very commendable. So good job there.
I appreciate that. Like, and you know what? You've got to. I got advice on it. I spoke to lots of people no one's been through COVID, but who had been through, you know, whether it was previous recessions or previous just sudden changes in the environment. And obviously, leading through that type of environment is a challenge, for sure. Especially when you have established product, established teams, and expectations from people around where something's going. And so to deliver news like, hey, we're gonna shake things up and try something new is a really difficult message to deliver. But what's most important, that I've learned, and I definitely didn't know this back in March, but what I can say now is just thinking about it and then having a very clear minded strategy and direction to say, like, this is where we're going to go. Like, not being indecisive about it or hoping that something's going to change, but analyzing the environment, understanding where you're at, understanding the challenges that are in front of you, and then being able to say, like, hey, everyone, like, you know win or lose, like, this is where we're going and this is what we're going to do. And I guess that's that's what we had to do as a business. And I'm sure there's many businesses out there that have done the same thing, but it's definitely a better thing to do that than to be in not take action or be indecisive, right?
Awesome. That foreshadows my next questions for you, because I wanted to chat about any advice you'd have for fintech startups that are just getting started, or rather the entrepreneurs launching these new fintech startups. You mentioned how with Loop you were able to move much quicker. You learned from your mistakes. Could you share maybe the differences between both that led to some perhaps lessons that others could take from your experience?
For sure. Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think, if one thing I'd say is that founders who are thinking about starting a business now, to some degree, not just in the fintech space, but in general, are at an advantage because they actually, they don't have the legacy infrastructure or legacy perspective that people maybe had before the pandemic, right? And so, like, there are some advantages to getting started now. So, in my view, despite all the uncertainty in the world, there's never been a better time to start. So, anyone who is thinking about starting a business, I think should go for it. In terms of, like, learnings and things that I've personally taken away from the experience, I'm sure that there'll still be much more to take away in the coming years, but um, it's really being hyper focused on the customer, and being hyper focused on achieving product market fit. And I think the way that you do that is by not fantasizing over, like, this ideal product or ideal thing that you want to create, or ideal way that the business is going to work. I think it's really be really focused on who your customer is and get to know that customer intimately and get to understand how is what you're building going to intimately solve that customer's problem. I think that is probably the most important thing, especially early on, to understand, because it's very easy to get carried away with an idea that you have that you think is going to work, and spend a lot of time on operations or processes or building sales funnels or all the other stuff that comes with creating a business, when really all you need to focus on is one thing, and it's what does your customer actually want.
Okay, cool. And last question or talking points I want to chat with you is just from an industry perspective now, looking at fintech. You've seen it for now a couple of years. I'd love to know your general thoughts on the Canadian fintech industry and how it's evolved, and also some of the startups that other fintech startups that you're looking at and that you've been impressed by their growth. or opportunities where there's gaps to be filled in the market?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Canadian fintech industry is challenged and always going to be challenged, and I think the reason for that is primarily that we are a slow mover when it comes to change and regulatory change. We're, obviously we're a perfect example of that, but it took us 8 years.
You
After
just need to launch a new product, and then there's going to be a new a new regulatory framework. Isn't it that how it
Yeah.
works? It's one plus one.
Yeah, no, like, we were 8 years late to the industry that we came to effectively in peer-to-peer lending, and that if you look at other things in the fintech industry, it's very rare that you see something happening in Canada that hasn't already been done somewhere else.
Hmm.
um, Now, I think that there's some amazing companies, some amazing founders here, and some really passionate and dedicated people. Um, but unfortunately, I think one of the trends that I've also seen is a lot of the most successful ones are the ones who have looked internationally to build their businesses. So they're Canadian businesses, but their customers are located geographically elsewhere. So whether
Right.
it's in the U.S. or U.K. or Australia, and so I think that is that's a thing that Canada, it's Canada needs to think about and focus on, because it makes it challenging to build businesses here when your own market isn't as receptive to them as other markets are. Like, if we want to be leaders, I think we really need to rethink how the fintech industry works here. But I do think, like I said, I think there's a lot of people who are doing good things. I'm very excited about a number of different sectors. I think, like, obviously some of the older ones were like wealth management and lending and things like that. There's now a lot of things happening in the property space. So there's a lot of property-based technology, whether it's making the process of buying and selling homes easier. I know that anyone who's bought or sold a house probably knows how frustrating that process can be. So seen a few cool companies to look out for there, both in Canada and the US. And I think that there's a lot of fintech enablement, so to speak. A lot of companies now that are making it a lot easier to provide products and services, or enable fintech type products and services for regular companies. And the ones that excite me the most are the ones that empower small businesses, because I'm always going to have that connection to smaller companies. So anyone who is enabling small businesses to to be successful is great. And obviously Shopify is massive. They're now the biggest company in Canada, at least by market cap. But like, they're a perfect example of that. And I think there's a lot in the fintech space that's going to be done kind of that's along the same lines of empowering customers to be successful.
Awesome. Well, Cato, thanks so much for joining me today on the show, and sharing your experience, telling us about your company, and all sharing those tips with everyone listening. It was awesome to connect with you, and I hope we'll be able to follow up in the near future. And best of luck with the new product launch. I'll be following closely.
For sure. No, appreciate you having me on. If anyone wants to check out the new product, it's at getloop.ca. It's brand new and just in the market. So would love any feedback from anyone who's watching, or if you're in the e-commerce space, hit me up on Twitter, and we can have a chat about it. But Nicholas, thanks for having me on. This was awesome. And yeah, let's keep in touch. And thanks again for the time.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.